A lot of focus is always on Trent Baalke. However, Trevor Lawrence and Doug Pederson don't get a pass. They need to be better. I'll tell you why in just a second on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday here on Locked On Jaguars. I am the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, Tony Wiggins. And we like to say it's your team every day, and we always thank you for making us your first listen. A quick reminder, we're free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. Just go over to Locked On Jaguars, the YouTube page. And once you get there, here's what you do. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, and then hit that bell so that you make sure you get notified each and every time we drop an episode. And then wherever you listen to your audio podcast, when you're driving in the car or you're at work or you're cooking or doing something that keeps your eyes off the TV screen, make sure you tap into that location every single day so you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every day. And we appreciate you. And you can be one too. All you got to do is just listen up every single day. All right. I saw over the weekend, everybody was saying, man, we wish we could, my boy, them Jags said, take up a GoFund so we could do a podcast every single day. A GoFund is not needed for that. Locked On takes care of us pretty good. And I don't think you're going to get me 7 days a week. That's just not going to happen. You get me 6 days a week during the NFL season. And I'm glad to do that. However, everyone needs a little time to themselves. But I do appreciate the sentiment and the love that says that you guys want to hear from me every single day. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to talk about the dynamic duo. And a lot was made of the fact that you get a coach and a quarterback and the combination of those two. And I previously in other shows, I had pointed out the importance of having two guys who were in lockstep with each other and who were joined at the hip. We used a lot of examples. Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin. We looked at success and how Brady and Belichick obviously is the main one, but you look at the success of teams that have really good quarterbacks and really good coaches, and those guys have been sort of a duo throughout history. And that's been a formula for a lot of people and a lot of organizations that has worked. The Jaguars have never really had that since they had Tom Coughlin and Mark Brunell. That's the closest thing. And that's as close as they got other than the 1 year in 2017. So stability at both coach and the quarterback spot with Doug Pederson and Trevor Lawrence. However, while they have lifted the organization up to better heights than they were prior to the arrival of both of those coaches, the coach and the player, it's not enough, and it has to be more. And I'm going to tell you why on this episode, that Doug Pederson, Trevor Lawrence, they have to lead, and not just at the press conference. They have to lead in other ways. They got to fix the issue of complacency. This team got complacent. That starts at the top, of course, and we beat up on Trent Baalke enough. I'm not really going to go there because that is what it is at this point. Can they overcome any perceived, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, any perceived weaknesses of the personnel department? Sure. It's like they won 9 games 2 years in a row. Could they have won 2 more games? I can think of 2 of them right off the top of my head where they probably could have won them, right? And you could probably think of a couple that they won that they could have lost. So we can do that and play that game all day. But Trent Baalke has been good enough as the GM of this team, and I know everybody's going to record this part. He has been good enough as a GM for this team to lift it beyond being one of the lower class teams in the National Football League. He has lifted this team up enough that they are relevant. They are fighting for respectability, and were on the last week of both years, the last 2 years, they were playing to go into the playoffs and win the division. And they won one year and they didn't win another. So we can be critical, but still acknowledge the fact that they have done a good enough job, in my opinion, where it is not catastrophic, right? But the point that I've always made is I want Trevor Lawrence to have everything at his disposal, because it seems like to me, when I think about Peyton Manning's career, he had a Hall of Fame running back. They traded a Hall of Fame running back. They got another Hall of Fame running back. Then he had a Hall of Fame wide receiver, a Hall of Fame coach, Hall of Fame guys on defense on every level, a great tight end, a second wide receiver that should be in the Hall of Fame. They had so much, and they won one title, but they were relevant each and every year. I see Patrick Mahomes, and I've seen him with Kelsey, who is in conversation of the two or three greatest tight ends to ever play this game, along with a wide receiver who's considered one of the 3 or 4 best wide receivers currently in the game now. And then you look at defense, other Hall of Famers, Chris Jones, and all of the guys like McDuffie and Snead and all of these players. So my point is you can be greedy when it comes to the GM, but you can't choose who your GM is if you're the head coach or the quarterback, right? So there's another part of this, and this is where Balky doesn't get, in my opinion. He shouldn't get all of the blame. The only part of the blame that Trent Balky, in my opinion, should get for the complacency issues of this team is the fact that they thought they had it licked. They thought they were there, man. They were sitting there last year, and I'm saying that's a mistake, where they went into the offseason saying, we have our ball club. We have our team. These are our young guys. We're going to run it back with these dudes. And it just did not work. And what it did was, in my opinion, it planted a seed of complacency. It planted a seed of we've arrived. It planted a seed of we got this. And then the bad thing happened was, it was a good thing and a bad thing. They started the season 8-3. They started the season 8-3. And at the time, if you really paid attention to it, you didn't think it was sustainable for them to continue to play the way that they had played in those 11 games. But there was 2 different ways of looking at it. And one way was, no, man, they can't win. They can't beat good teams like this. They got to fix it. The other one was, man, they haven't even played well. They haven't played well in their 8-3 in 11 games. If they hit that switch and the light comes on, they could be really, really good. And we were only a year removed away from them being 2-7 and finishing the year and ended up 9-8 and winning the division and even winning a playoff game where they came back from a 27-0 deficit. So the fact that we believed that there was a chance that switch could be hit in a minute, in a second, and we were waiting for it. We were waiting for the exact same thing to happen. During Philly's run back in the day, they went on a magnificent run with Doug Pederson as the head coach. And it's like the switch came on. We were waiting for that switch to come on. Here's what you don't do in the National Football League, which stands for not for long, and everybody knows that. You can't sit around and wait for anything. You shouldn't expect the light to just pop on, even though it happened once, okay? That's just not the way that this works. It's not, especially with a young, impressionable team. In my opinion, that falls squarely on the shoulders of, first, Trent Baalke, but more important than that, it falls on the shoulders of Doug Pederson. It falls. How many times have you heard Doug say, we just couldn't, we just couldn't get it. We were waiting and trying to figure out how. That's on you. That's on you. That's on you, and it's on Trent for having that attitude in the first place. But then with Trevor, if I have one criticism of Trevor, and I try not to criticize him too much because I know there's an immense amount of pressure on Trevor Lawrence. If there's one thing about Trevor Lawrence, I'd like to see him more, not necessarily demonstrative as a leader. But I'd like to see a little bit more of a chippy side where everybody's not friendly all the time. You see, it's not always kumbaya, and it's not always everything's going to be all right, and it's not always we just got to stick together. No, sometimes it comes down to this. You need to do your job. And I saw Tom Brady, and I saw Peyton Manning, and I saw Drew Brees, and I saw guys get on their teammates and lead by example. And I think this is what Trevor Lawrence has to do. I'm going to talk more about that leadership, and I'm going to talk more about Doug Pederson and where it comes from and where it should come from as we continue here on Locked On Jaguars on a Monday. We'll get right to it in just a second. First, got to let you guys know about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Gametime. That's right, man. Gametime is the absolute truth, especially when you have been procrastinating like I am known to do when it comes to spending my money on things that I want to do. That is like buying tickets to events, to theater, the comedy shows, the games, all of that stuff. Sometimes I wait till the last minute, and guess what? Gametime can fix that for you. Last minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing, seat views, the lowest price guarantee, Gametime, ticket coverage, all of that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Shout out to Milan Man, who's outside making all of that noise. But hey, it is what it is. Hopefully you guys don't hear it too much of a distraction. I'm talking about Trevor Lawrence and Doug Pederson, guys that seem to have distracted themselves with a little bit of complacency and a little bit being a little bit too laid back and sitting around waiting for things to happen instead of making those things happen. Look, I know it's a tired old acronym when people say the NFL is not for long, but just think about it like this. Doug Pederson won a Super Bowl. Doug Pederson won a Super Bowl, and then like 2 or 3 years later, he got fired, right? It is, what have you done for me lately? And Mike Caldwell, the old defensive coach, and all of that staff that got let go, they'll tell you right now that it's a league that is not for long, because those dudes they had planted their flag here in Jacksonville, and 2 years later, they're no longer here. And if things don't change, you're going to see some more real estate being exchanged if things don't get better. That's the nature of this business, man. Things just don't always, you don't get a lot of time, right? You don't get a lot of time as players. You don't get a lot of time as coaches. You don't get a lot of time as GMs relative to everything else. You have to really, guys got to show you what they can do, especially when you're talking about giving them $200-300 million in terms of at least with the quarterbacks. There's no time to sit around, man, and just assume that everything is going to be okay. Now, I will give them credit. This offseason, there's been a little bit more desperation, and that's what I'll call it. There's been a little bit more attentiveness to the moment, the right now. But I would be lying to you if I tell you that the aftertaste wasn't still in a bunch of people's mouths that I talked to all the time about the way last year went. Somebody was just talking to me about it the other day. They was like, they really dropped the ball last year, man. And what really led to a lot of those discussions was the fact that Houston, coming off of a season last year that they had that looked pretty similar to the one the Jaguars had the year before, the Colts breaking in a rookie quarterback and a new head coach, and all of a sudden they're a lot better than people thought. And then the Titans, believe it or not, regardless of what their record is and the fact that they're picking in the top 10, they are optimistic about what their prospects are. And the reason why is because they like their quarterback. They have been really, really aggressive, and they believe in their general manager. So there's a lot of momentum. That it looks a little bit different, but it's the same thing for these other teams. But the Jaguars are in a different position. The Jaguars fans still have a little bit of a hangover, and maybe the organization does too. I wonder how it feels to have regret in that team sport atmosphere. Sometimes we have regret, but we're the only ones that have to live with it. Maybe our family a little bit, but I wonder if the regret part of this will factor into what this season has for the Jaguars. Will they play too desperate? Will they try to make up for lost time? Are they playing catch up with themselves, basically because they went to sleep at the wheel? And I do give Doug Pederson a whole lot of credit for this. Even though some coaches got fired, I give Doug Pederson a lot of credit for one thing. And that is they kind of admit that they thought they had something that they didn't have, which is why they made wholesale changes this year. I really believe the attitude around here was, boy, we were good, but now we're going to add Calvin Ridley to this situation. We got a game breaker, and we'll show up in the draft, and we'll draft these dudes that we can draft and develop, and we'll have all of these young guys, and boy, we're going to be fine. Yeah, and look, they changed up most of the team. They're going to have 2 new corners. They're going to have a new safety. They're going to have a new defensive interior lineman, and if they draft any of those things that I mentioned, they're going to have a contributor in the first round at those spots. And then on the offensive line, well, they're pretty much running. This is the only thing that bothers me a little bit. The weakest part of this team is what they're mostly bringing back, with the exception of Mitch Morse added at center. So I do get this feeling, though. I get this feeling that while they're being more intentional about what they need to do and create competition and iron sharpening iron, I do feel like a little bit of this is still like, hey, it wasn't on me. And that's Doug and his offensive side of the ball. Press Taylor's still there. We've had that discussion 1,000 times. They got the same running backs. They don't have Calvin Ridley. They have Gabe Davis. They switched up their 5th receiver, who's going to be the kick returner. But for the most part, it has been, we're running this back on offense, which is going to add one more player, be a little bit better. And that's why a lot of people probably believe they're going offensive in the draft with that first-round pick. I don't know that they're going to do that, because it seems like to me that a lot of blame was put on the coaching staff, on the defensive side of the coaching staff, and then a lot of the blame that they believe they could fix was put on them, and that on the offense, and that comes with guys just not being complacent, not thinking that you have. You know, we look at Trevor and we go, he's so young. He's so young. Like, we got all of this time. No, they got to make a decision on his extension. They got to figure out to what level he's going to be extended. Is he going to reset the market? They got to do all of that, and then they have to deal with the fact that once he does that, or they do it and they extend him, that they're going to have less resources to actually go out and spend money in free agency, which is the thing that they tried to get away from last year, but it didn't work because they're not really good at just drafting guys and not signing guys. So there's a big question of whether the approach that they took this offseason, where they signed a bunch of dudes at a little bit less money, or should they have just gone big and gone after one big piece, like Christian Wilkins? Just get a big young defensive tackle and just pay him $90 million or whatever, and then use that. Adding a 10 to your team, adding a 9.5, adding a 10, is that better than adding a whole bunch of 7s and 7.5s? And I'm not disrespecting Eric Armstead or anything like that, but there's a difference in pay for a reason, right? And it probably has more to do with where Armstead is in his career as opposed to his ability. They can't fix these issues unless they fix it in the head of the people who they actually put to sleep. So you're trying to wake up people that you actually put to sleep last year. How much credibility are they going to have when they switch up how they do business a little bit? And will the players buy into it, and will they accept it? Because there's 2 different sets of marching orders now coming from the same people. I mean, last year you believed in me. Now you don't. I mean, what is it? I do believe that there's a combination of things that they can do, and I'll discuss some of those things in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I have to let you know about Locked On Sports Today. If you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on the TV all day, man, you have to turn it down when the volume with all of that shouting. You got to turn that volume down. Sometimes I mute the TV and I still hear those good dudes yelling. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube, or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's discuss some of the things that they can do. They have to admit it first, but then some of the things that they can do here to make sure that this year goes better than last year. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Man, we've all gotten to situations where we have needed therapy. I know I have for a lot of different reasons. And I tell you what, one of them that came up not too long ago was time management. When you don't have all the time in the day to do the things that you want to do and the people that you want to do it with because you're so preoccupied, it could lead to you feeling really, really guilty and worn down. All right, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you've benefited from therapy like I have, man, in the past, you know it works even with time management. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. We're talking about how to fix the issues of complacency. Now, when we talk about good things that happened last year, there's this old adage that, you know, when you go back to training camp for a new year, you have to start completely over, right? You have to start over. What you did last year is garbage in, garbage out. You take some good things, but that doesn't score you 1 point, get you one first down, or win you one game on a new year. We all know that. You have to reboot the whole thing and start all over. I think the one thing that you can carry over is your identity. You know who you are based on the work that you put in, based on how you go about your business. The Jaguars don't know what that is, though, because to me, they've done things different ways in the last 3 off seasons. They had a different team. They had a younger team. They dealt with them with kid gloves. Doug kind of raised them up a little bit. They still had the number 1 pick. That's all right, because guess what happened? They got better and they got improved. Well, with Trevor, they had the number 1 pick 2 years in a row. But when Doug got in, they went straight from the outhouse to 9-win team that won a playoff game, right? And won the division. They were right back in that same situation after 16 weeks last year, but it just didn't feel the same. And then you got a different result. That's because they did different things in the offseason. Well, Doug, I thought he was going to toughen up on them a little bit and expect more. And I think at the end of the year, you heard rumblings that he was different in the locker room, that he told people they were playing and coaching for their jobs, and they had to get their together. It didn't seem like it resonated, because that's a change. And even if it's right, and it was correct, coming from him, it just seemed a little bit different and odd, I think, to some of those players, because that demeanor is not what he had displayed all of those other times. So what happened is it's just as simple as, we don't believe you. You could be saying you ever been in that situation where you're saying some true stuff and people are going, yeah, we just don't want to hear that from you, because that's not what you said before. Football is one of those things that are like that. Folks need to see you being who you are all the time, and they don't want you to change. That's just the nature of the business. That definition, that is absolutely the definition of having an identity, right? People know who you are. They know what you're thinking about. They know how you're going to move every single day. My wife and kids tell you what I'm going to do every single day. They ain't going to tell you what I'm going to say every single day, but they know it's still coming from the same place, right? And I think football is the same. But you have to be the right person from the very beginning. And what that means is sometimes people don't accept change. The only change they accept is a whole new person being involved. I think Doug Pederson, there's a way for him to start this year off, and that is by using competition as the thing that changes this franchise. That's why in the draft, I just want him to get the best player available who's going to make one of their units strong. And even if it's a pass rusher who does not start, I think we have to get beyond thinking that a team that wins 9 games has all of these holes everywhere, right? And just realize, no, they can line up and play and win 9 more games, but we're trying to elevate. And when you're trying to elevate, you got to do something different, man. I mean, you got to do it in a different way. You can't get the same propulsion using the same thing that got you from point A to point B. You ain't going to be able to use that to get from point B to point C. You can be consistent, but it has to be done with more force. All the smiley faces, all the happy to be here. I'm not saying be mean and tough for no reason, but I think you have to hold people accountable. You don't have to change your personality as much as changing the atmosphere in the building by creating competition and accountability. Tony Dungy was one of the nicest people, didn't curse, but his teams always played with accountability. Joe Gibbs, good Christian man, hardly ever says anything, but he has the fire. He had that fire in him, whether it's with NASCAR or whether it's in the National Football League. It was the same thing. It was like he was nice, but he wasn't a pushover and he wasn't a sucker because he was going to hold you accountable for everything. And I think they need to hold themselves accountable for everything. They got off to a good start, in my opinion, in the offseason when they admitted themselves, without getting too specific, when they admitted to themselves that, look, we kind of thought we arrived. And if you really listen to what they were saying, they were almost saying that, yeah, we kind of put our own guys to sleep a little bit and we were waiting on it to fix themselves. They misread the situation. They checked the temperature and they didn't read the thermometer correctly, because what you have to do with these young cats, man, and it is what it is. You got to lead them. You got to lead them. You got to put competition on them. Those gladiators are built for that. That's what they want. They want that accountability. They want that competition, because you know what? That is the game. And it has to be every single day. To quote Tom Coughlin, we got to have grit. We got to fight for everything. That's the way that this works in the National Football League, and there is no way around it. You ain't gonna nice guy your way to no championships. That's just not it. And everybody getting along and having chemistry, while that is a good sign for a football team, that can't be what you lead with. What you lead with is how you work, the results, and pressure is going to bust pipes. And we've heard Trent Baalke say that. We've heard we got to put friction in this thing. Basically, we got to tighten up. Nothing is given. Somebody's fighting for everything you got. They want it every single day. So with Trent going out and maybe not going 90 million for a DT, maybe coming down a little bit. You go 90 million for a DT, he's got to play. If you go big boy, big money players, competition. But a guy that you're paying like that, you don't have to do that. You don't have to hold his hand to the fire. You don't have to tell him look over his shoulder. That dude's already doing that anyway, because it's him against him. But in this situation, I do think when I said that what the Jaguars were doing was injecting right into the middle of their team, it may not be what I would have wanted to happen or you would have wanted to happen, but identify it for what it is. That is exactly what they're doing. And they're looking for outside people to come in and change the attitude and the basic template of how they go about their business every single day. I hope it works. I hope it works. I hope the people that are mainstays, the people that are left over from the last couple of years that are still on this team, I hope they can get over it. They can get over the fact that they basically got rockabye babied all the way through last season, and then they were waiting on something to happen. Trevor Lawrence has even said it. We were kind of waiting for that button to click. Trevor, you don't wait for it. You make it happen. You make it click. Don't wait for it. There's nothing worse in the NFL than waiting. There's one thing worse, and that is not playing hard because you think you're going to get hurt. You are absolutely going to get hurt if you don't play hard. You have to guard yourself, and I think you have to guard your psyche, and you have to guard your emotions, and you also have to guard the little currency that you have in terms of having time in the National Football League, and realize you don't have that much of it. And every single day and every single moment, just the way that you are as a fan, that's how this team has to be. Everything has to matter. Off-season workouts, participation when it comes to involuntary stuff. Doug Pederson asked last year during the season, what are you doing when you're not here? All of that stuff has to come into consideration, and they got to get those football playing Jessies to buy into it. And the only way is through competition. Money is one thing, but these guys also like to play, and they like to be the people that are the reason why the team is doing better. All right, so we're going to keep running through stuff like this and the draft prospects. We're going to take a hard look at some more prospects. I'm really feeling Quinyon Mitchell, but I just don't think he's going to be there when the Jaguars pick. I'm going through a series of players that might surprise you and players that we expect fully should be there. We'll talk about that. But I want to start Monday out with talking about the attitude of the leaders of this organization, and that is the duo of Doug Pederson and Trevor Lawrence. Before you add anybody, I don't care if it's the next Jerry Rice or the next Lawrence Taylor, they have to fix the complacency issues that bothered them last year. And it's not just about talking about it, it's about being about it. You guys make sure that you can be about Locked On Sports today, because that's what it is. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV channels app. And make sure if you're in your car, you listen to the podcast, the audio version of the podcast. You don't have to see my beautiful face every day. Make sure you check that out also. And don't miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Till next time, man, you guys take care. We'll discuss more tomorrow. Just because it's your team every day. That's what we do. We'll see you tomorrow.